Hey guys, this is Doug with Cold War Collectors, and today I'm talking about West German Splinter. Now, Splinter first originated before Nazi Germany in 1931. The first one was printed on Zeltbodens, which are triangular shelter tarps. Now, later on, they started making the most common one during World War II was Luftwaffe Splinter Muster 41. It was a scaled down version of the Hirsch Splinter Muster 31, which was used on Zelts, and Luftwaffe Splinter Muster 41 was used on some Luftwaffe uniforms such as the Konnensack, which is the bone sack, the jumpsuit Paras, and like some other things as well. Now, that was used exclusively by the Fallschirmjägers. However, I've heard sometimes SS would sometimes private purchase that, but I have no knowledge of that being trustworthy at all. Eventually, World War II ends, and then West Germany is formed. West Germans originally did not have a camouflage pattern. Then by 55 to 56, between that era, Belgium was experimenting with Liebenmuster, which was another World War II German camouflage pattern. The Belgians didn't like it, so they gave it to the West Germans. The West Germans started using it. Then in 56, the West Germans started redoing Splinter, hence this one. This is the 1956 pattern, the first generation one. Now, you may see these white stripes around the actual edges of the pattern. That's actually a widespread error, supposedly, because what they do, they arrange it on the printing press and then have it so that would be printed that way. Now, this is the one with the small rain, because on the original Splinter it had rain pattern, which was the later pattern that the NVA would start using, as in the East German Army. However, this had rain, but it wasn't really that visible on it from a distance. But if you saw it from a distance, you'd be able to see the rain pattern. This was a smaller rain pattern. The larger one was called Watermelon Seed. I don't have that one. Those ones are pretty uncommon to find as well. But it just had a larger rain pattern, and I believe they said the yellow and tan was lighter. Now, you're seeing this, and the brown parts right here seem like pinkish, but they're like a cocoa brown. It's just mainly because I have a light overhead, and it somewhat distorts the color on some of the videos. So that's the one problem with it, but this one was actually used, and like basically it was used for a really long time because it actually has a lot of abuse on it. Almost all the buttons except one on this are gone. There's a lot of field stitching, lots of tears. This is all faded. This is all frayed right there. This sleeve, all the buttons are missing. This is faded. This has a bunch of like scuff marks. This is field repaired, but it was done poorly, and it's torn as well. That's torn. The zipper's broken. The inside you can actually see a lot of marks, basically where they were washing in. This would actually fade part of the pattern. This part of the adjusting belt's torn. Has the other adjusting belt that goes on the upper part of the waist. Has a tag right here that says J. Knauer. That's the manufacturer, not the guy's name. On the hood, it has these grommets. These are for attaching a hood. This wraps around the hood, and there's two buttons here, so it would form a full collar around the neck. Now, the epaulets are still intact. It doesn't. I assume it would have like slide-on epaulets, kind of like the later Flecktarn jackets had. Now, the other thing that's important about this. The Bulgarians started using these later on, after the West Germans started getting rid of them. The BGS, the Bundesgrundschutz, used these for a very, very short time, but then they started going over... what was the name of it? They started going over to the Marsh camouflage, which was another World War II pattern. But they used this for a very short time, but they got rid of them really quickly. They started using Sturmtarnmarsch, that was the name of it, Sturmtarnmarsch, which is Marsh camouflage. They used that from the late 50s up until 1976, and there were 3 patterns of it. Now, another thing that's important, the hoods are not helmet covers as far as I know. Because I think they said all the helmet covers were actually private purchased, and they only started appearing after the uniform was phased out of service, which was about 1970-75, but By that time, it was pretty rare. I've seen pictures of mountaineering troops with this type of jacket with the two D rings. This one's aluminum. I think this one's a replacement made out of maize tack, but it's obviously original to the real uniform because you can see it has a lot of age on it. It even has marks where it was sitting for an extended period of time. Now, these uniforms are pretty hard to find. I was talking to a few people in Germany, and they said how it's almost impossible to find them there. But I've seen full sets of these go for about $230 to $300 in the U.S., but I've never seen the helmet cover. I've seen the hood, though, but I've never seen the hood for sale individually. But what happens, these got phased out by the West Germans, and the Bulgarians started making their own variants. Because the Bulgarians were using patterns during World War II, and then they started using them during the Cold War. Supposedly the Iraqis had a small amount of copies of these, but it was their own local modification to it, and it was a completely different cut. And I believe that's all. It's just that these uniforms are harder to find because they were early West German. And also, another thing about this, I've also heard them saying that they had Zeltbans in this pattern, but I haven't really seen that many of them. So I believe that's all. Basically, Zeltbahn is a tent, like a free-sided tarp that you make into a tent. And I believe that's all.